You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Hello and welcome to the Bombad Generals. It's Seth, and I'm here with the amazing, awesome, wonderful Matt. Matt,
wow.
How are you?
I think you're also amazing, awesome, and wonderful, Seth. That's
you just said
a
that
lot of positivity. Is this because of Valentine's Day, or
no? It's a Monday. Like, we're recording this on a Monday, and I love Mondays. You know,
interesting take. Okay,
yeah.
You learn something new every day. You know who else loves Mondays? Todd.
Who?
Todd loves Mondays. He was catching up on Book of Boba Fett earlier, really digging that. And he was on his way over to my place to record. And the problem is his bright, shiny speeder bike is just too slow. So he might make it by the end of the episode. We'll see. He's giving all he's got. Yeah.
We'll see. So does that confirm that Todd is Canadian?
He could live on Point Roberts. I haven't asked him. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we got a pretty cool episode. But before we dive into what we got planned today, we got a question from, I apologize if I butcher your last name, but we got a question from Matthew Gurgley. And he wanted to know, I'm just going to read his question. He said, as an avid CIS player, I had a question I would like to ask Bombad General Sponder. If Dark Troopers emerge as a threat in a post-Blizzard world, do you think, if they are going to, yes, do you think the Separatist players will return to an old friend to help them counter these menace, the Ion Spider? You know, he thinks Ion Spiders in the post-Blizzard world, supported by B1s with E5Ss and E60Rs, will be able to get enough damage through to counter Dark Troopers, even with the 15-point increase to the Ion gun. Let's talk about that. Do we think Ion Spiders will make a comeback?
So I have thoughts about this because I played my Vader Darks into a double Ion Spider list. And as it so happens, I was actually talking with Bobby Joe Thomas today about, and the conversation of Ion Spiders into Dark Troopers came up, which is our last episode. We were talking to him about his Maul or his Ventress double Spider list that he was rocking. So I think the answer is, long and short of it, is that Spiders are a tool and a pretty decent tool in the CIS toolkit to counter Darks, but they are not the solution. You can't just slap a couple Spiders in and say, good, I'm done, right? Because here's the thing. Unlike a regular vehicle, if you ionize a Dark Trooper, they lose 25% of their actions instead of 50%. And that can be meaningful still, but timing is very important. So let's consider the initial engagement. Dark Troopers are probably not move, shoot. They probably have to take a couple moves before they can engage. So move, aim, move, shoot. If you ionize them before they go, then they will...
First time.
The first time, yes. If you ionize them before they've activated at all, then they will just move, and then they're cool. And then they'll again move, shoot, right? So you're not even really taking that much away from them with the Ion. So really you have to ionize them after they've gone once, which is not too difficult for CIS, right? Like they can, they have perfect order control usually. And Spiders, they've got Impact 2, they've got Ion, they've got Precise 2 with lots of aims usually, so they can really fish for crits. But, you know, they will fold eventually, right? And I think they need some B1 backup support to really make it happen. And they're still good, I think, in other matchups. Like 6 dice pass cover is very good. They went away because Pikes existed, right? And then Blizzard came in, obviously. Like, I still think Spiders are maybe a tough call in a Blizzard world because speeder bikes can burn them down very fast. But since we're talking post-Blizzard, I think Spiders can work, but you need, Magna rockets or droid rockets, some extra stuff there. Because, as we were saying, I think double Dark Troopers is the sweet spot. And I don't think Ion Spiders can do enough on their own before the Dark Troopers engage. Because the trick is, once they make you start rolling saves, Dark Troopers love hitting light saves because they don't have pierce, they just have volume. Bobby Joe's feedback today was spiders aren't the answer. So he's take that from a person who's been playing CIS, and he thinks that spiders don't do enough. So he's kind of looking elsewhere. So I'd say kind of in between us. Like, I think they were very effective in the game I played against them. But I also started 0 for 7 on Dark Trooper saves. And then, he's feeling like they're not good enough. I think they're somewhere in the middle. Again, they're one piece in the toolkit.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, they're not the answer. I don't even know if there is a answer yet to Dark Troopers. Like, spiders, you can kind of fit them into a list. You don't really have to build your whole list around the spiders, which is very helpful for CIS. I would consider that even if they're super backed up with B1s and everything, I would kind of it'd be like a hybrid list to where if you're running a saber tank, you could be really strong against Dark Troopers, but you may fall short to another list. So it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors, where your spiders, especially with the Force user with Maul or Asajj, those are kind of like a hybrid where it can handle Dark Troopers, not the answer, but it's a better matchup than what you would do without spiders. But it can also handle non-Dark Trooper lists decently. So I'd probably put it as kind of a hybrid.
I think one of the things for CIS is that Maul and Asajj are both very finicky Force users. And if Dark Troopers get a shot off on them, that could be the end of them, right? They're not big tanky, they're finesse Force users, and you kind of have to brute force Dark Troopers. I think if you are a CIS main and you're trying to play against Dark Troopers, I think you do, as much as it's just a part of the list, I think you kind of need spiders, because I can't really envision a CIS list that deals well with Dark Troopers that doesn't have spiders, unless it's a double AAT. The reason we kind of bring up these tanks as good Dark Trooper counters or potential Dark Trooper counters for me is because Dark Troopers are actually pretty bad into actual armor, because they only have impact on their range 2 cycle gun. They've got crit 1, right? It's not awful, but it's not what they want to be shooting at. Especially if it has red defense dice and repairs. And, in the case of a saber tank, red surging defense dice with dodge access. So they can't kill things super fast if it's full armor. And obviously, a tank with armor piercing shells is going to get a lot of hits through. So that's kind of why they fit as good counters. So yeah, maybe there's something in a double AAT resurgence, but I think otherwise you're probably fitting in spiders as part of a greater army.
But now on to the meat of the episode. And in the past, you've heard us talk a ton about Force users. I don't think it's any secret that both Matt and I love Force users, and it's really hard to leave the table without Force users. But today we actually want to highlight something really different. Is we want to highlight a gunline list. So Gunline 101.
Yes, agreed. I think for me, a lot of my thinking is when I run a gunline, I have a Force user, but we will talk a bit about what a non-Force user gunline looks like and the differences. But yeah, this is exciting. I think gunlines can get a bad rap, kind of oh, you just want to stand and shoot there. You want to play VAPs and not play the game. And I think that's not entirely warranted. I think gunlines are very interesting to play, or they can be very interesting, because it's a game about careful positioning and really leveraging the advantages you get. But before I get too far down that road, Seth, this was your idea. Where do you want to start talking about Gunlines 101? How do we enter this conversation?
So first things first, I think we just need to define what a gunline is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So one thing that defines a gun line is it doesn't have bikes. It's not a super mobile like army. It's more of it's a really your core or your core units are the core of the army, to where like your cores have heavies on them. They're beefed up to where like every dice pool is like a good dice pool, in my opinion. As clones and maybe like could be a little bit different, like because you have like maybe one unit that's supporting a naked phase one supporting.
And you can have supports for a gun line for sure, but I think for me it's like, you know, you've got 4 or 5 decked out core units who have good durability and good offense. You're kind of like, hey, this is a good efficient unit, I'm going to take it times 5 and add in a little bit of other stuff that'll spice things up for me.
Yeah, and most of your gunline list is like taking one specific unit and just multiplying it for 4 times or so. You could swap out some heavies, but at least 4 of your units have like the same heavy, in my opinion. Usually,
gun lines also operate range 3 is pretty much the standard operating. Like there's not a lot of stuff. Maybe a classic shoreline is kind of a range 4 gun line because it can do damage at range 4, but they still want to close to range 3. If we're talking range 2, like fleets or black suns, like I'd say that's more aggro than gun line. Usually, if we're talking gun line, you have some poke at range 4 and you're really firing on all cylinders at range 3.
Yeah. So that's definition of a gun line. Of course, in your gun line, we do recommend that you put a linebacker unit or like whether that be like a Magna. I probably wouldn't put any Wookiees in there.
So why do you want a linebacker unit in your gun line?
Well, one, force user, because once a force user gets into your gun line, like your gun line can't shoot, and once your gun line operates in a range capacity, it's not really like your core units are really strong in melee. And when a Jedi, like a good Jedi player, would just dive into your core units and just take out your core units left and right and just distract them, so the rest of your opponent's army can just do whatever they want.
Especially a Sith, I would say. Like,
yes,
they're going to get in there, they're going to chop people up, force choke your heavies, and just cause a lot of disruption. So you need a deterrent so that they can't just have a field day.
Yes, and so whether that deterrent be Magna Guards, another force user, I wouldn't even say like a fleet trooper. Like that's not a deterrent. This is more of a melee strong, typically immune to pierce in melee unit. Because Vader doesn't want to see that. Maul doesn't want to see that. Luke doesn't want to see that, especially with all the deflect change. They're going to be even more careful because your linebacker unit can hit the opponent's force user strong. So good gun lines do have a linebacker unit, whether that's another force user.
And I think they operate in different ways too, right? Like if your linebacker unit is like, let's say, Anakin.
Yeah.
He's an okay duelist, but usually Jedi don't want to be fighting Jedi all that much. Like it's not the most effective way. If you have a force user, your deterrent is, hey, if you dive me, I'm going to force push you into the open and shoot you with all my guns. If you've got like 2 Magna Guards, your deterrent is, sure, you can dive and attack my B1s, but then I'm going to countercharge you with, 8 dice or whatever Magnas throw in melee, right? Like I'm going to just come at you hard, and it's going to be a slog to kill all of these Magna Guards because they're immune pierce and such. And I think you do need that kind of volume. Like I think a single Magna Guard or a single Wookiee probably not enough. Like I've seen people be like, oh, I've got a Rebel gunline and Chewbacca with tenacity is my melee linebacker. And it's like, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough because remember, the thing about force users is they can choose who to engage as well. If you've got like one guy who throws 4 or 5 dice as your anti-Jedi threat, and that's it, the Jedi will just say, hey, I'm going to just stay away from him. If he comes at me, I'll force push him away, go somewhere else, right? It's hard to do that if you've got like 2 Magna Guards there. So that's something to consider as well.
Yes. So that's That's why you need a linebacker. That's why you need a linebacker.
So we
love football terms.
That's the warning. That's the warning.
Yes.
So we haven't really talked about, like, okay, I've got this gun line. What do I want to do proactively? Like, how am I playing this gun line to get the maximum effect out of it?
Well, I think your objective is, number one, some of the things that Gunline don't want to do, like they don't want to do bombing run. They don't want to do hostage exchange, really.
I think they can.
They like...
Depends.
I mean, maybe. Depends. Maybe like a Rex Gunline. Get that Scout 2 for your hostage. But like they want one of those, like...
They like the more static ones.
Yeah.
You know, like VAPs, KP, Intercept. They really like... They can do Breakthrough if they've got Courage too. It's not the end of the world. But usually they just kind of want to find a good position and fire. The good thing about the gun lines, you know, they survive on, hey, I'm going to out-efficiency you and out-attrition you. So something like KP, where you're not scoring until the end of the game and you can just line up and fire for the first 3, 4, 5... Oh, excuse me. The first 3, 4, 5 turns... That's really nice. You know, intercept the transmissions. You know, even though you score on turns 2 and 4, you can sit there and just shoot them while your opponent tries to score, or you move to scoring position, and that's where you're setting up camp. So really, it's just mostly bombing run is the big one. Payload they don't really like because they have to be moving along with it. As again, breakthrough they don't really like. If you can aim, shoot, that's what you want to do with your gun line. Ideally.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big thing is that your gun line is kind of sticking together a lot. Not like a clone ball way, but like they are generically within range 2 of each other, like the whole army kind of.
Yeah.
And so just because like one of the things that's really strong about gun lines that I like is that whenever a unit comes into range of one of your units to fire, they're going to be punished by all the other cores. And so it's like 3 to 4 units firing back at that one unit. So it's like it really punishes your opponent who comes into range of one of your units.
So yes, this actually, so you've hit the main thing for me that I put down in my notes when we decided we were going to talk about this. For me, top level gunline play is all about range control, right? So it's about how do you leverage your range advantage if you have one and make sure that you are firing effective shots at range 3 and getting more effective shots than your opponent. So as you say, ideally what you want is, hey, if they shoot one guy, my entire army shoots back at that guy.
Yeah.
So usually what you have to do is, for me, let's say you've got 5 pikes, 5 whatever. We'll say you've got 5 gunline units, core. And I would say you want to start activating the ones in the back first and moving them up when you're moving and starting engagements. Because if you take the guy who's your very front pike or whatever, and you move him forward speed 2 to shoot something at range 3, then none of your other guys can move up far enough. You don't want to put yourself in a position where your opponent can attack a unit you have and it's out of a move shoot range from your guys, right?
Yeah, without getting punished.
Exactly. Yeah. You want it to say, hey, if I start with the guy in the back, maybe I can't get a range 3 shot. Maybe I'll move up early in the turn, just do a plink range 4 shot, maybe do a wound, put a suppression on, whatever. But if you come and attack my most forward guy, I know that I can come hit you at range 3, right?
Yeah.
So that's always the thing. You want to make sure that if they can attack your most forward guy, you can hit them back at range 3. And if the other thing that kind of deals with that is cycling units. So that's kind of like cycling units from front to back. Because a lot of gunline play, you want to be preserving activations. You don't want to be falling behind on acts. That's just general Legion, but I think gunlines especially are good at this. Is, you know, you obviously, as we said, you want to aim shoot as much as you can. But if you've got a unit with 2 guys left, you want to attack and get out of there, or just
get out of there,
or just get out of there, right? And the other thing is you don't want to necessarily attack with a unit and then be sitting at range 3 of their entire army, because then they're all going to aim shoot at you all turn, right? If it's your first activation of the turn and you aim attack, then 3-4 of their guys are going to shoot back with an aim at you. Mm-hmm. So if you're going first, even if it's a full unit, you could attack, move back, and then they have to come forwards. And then, you attack, move back, and you're kind of pulling them in. And then the guys in the back move up and attack. So you're kind of basically just turning units forwards and backwards to control that range and make them a little less efficient, make them play your game and come out to maybe a spot that has a bit less cover. Or something like that, because they're trying to get range and they have to sacrifice cover to do that. That's not as big a deal these days. Cover's pretty easy to come by.
Yeah.
But conceptually, that's the idea with cycling units.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely like a whole machine working together, just going back and forth. And it happens it's a very effective machine, especially like with the red dice saves. Like, man, it can get really good with Empire, but even like pikes are really good at that. I would feel like
Courage 2 gunlines are very good, right? Like, very good. There's a reason that when Rebel DLT captains were a thing, they didn't have Courage 2, but they had one turn where they could guarantee 2 actions. That's great for objective play. That's good for preserving your activation if you have to run. Pikes are very good at it because they can shoot and move if they have to. And when they don't have to, they still have 2 actions more than a single trooper unit. So they can aim shoot. Because again, if we're talking range control, one of the ways you can range control is, hey, I'm going to move up and shoot this guy at range 4, but if he's Courage 1, now he's got a suppression. Most likely, he's not going to be able to move back and attack me, so I'm feeling pretty good, right? So the more courage you have, the harder it is for opponents to do that sort of thing to you. Exactly.
Yeah. And I know playing in real life, like TTS, it's super easy just to get into that exact, the range 3 and just do a lot of pre-measurements. But in real life, it takes a lot of work to actually do that with each different unit. And so one thing about gunlines in real life play, especially for a tournament, you gotta make sure that you have that range 3 stick and you're measuring it every single time.
Measure constantly.
Always measuring, which you could be like, oh yeah, that's range 3 totally. I'll bring it down. Even if it is range 3, you want to make sure if you're going into a force user, you want to make sure you're way out of range for even that force user to engage with you and everything. So you're always measuring. I would say gun lines, you're measuring more than any other.
Yes.
Legion, any other army.
You want to be measuring a lot, gun lines especially, and to be effective at that and be efficient, you're going to want to have practice. You're going to want to get reps in, because you also don't want to, you want to be a good opponent. You don't want to take up all the time in the game, especially in the tournament setting. If there's no chess clocks, you want to be courteous and make sure that you're using as much time as your opponent is using. You're not using more of it. So don't spend 20, it doesn't take 20 minutes of measuring to figure stuff out, but just when they're doing their stuff or when you're thinking, just get used to, hey, know what the ranges you need to check are, be checking them, have that idea in your head.
We'll continue on with our gunline talk, but first, hear a quick word from our sponsors.
Has this ever happened to you? You're walking down the street and then some guy in shiny armor comes out and says he can bring you in hot or he can bring you in cold? Hello, I'm Batu of Batu and Batu, personal injury lawyers. And I'll tell you something, that's a death threat. You can sue the pants off Mr. Shiny Pants over there. Has your boss choked you out at work, either in person or over a video call? Sue his leather pants off too. Has a Wookiee ripped your arms out because you're a Trandoshan? That's a hate crime. Sue his fur right off his back with Batu and Batu. Call us today and we'll get you the money you deserve. Remember, just give us some credit, because we'll get you all the credits you deserve.
Alrighty. So we are back. So we were talking a lot in the first segment about range control with gunlines. So there's actually a very specific tactic that, if you've been around Legion for a while, you've probably seen this happen. But if you're kind of just starting out, it's not something you might see until you get to competitive play. And that is exact range. So when your opponent will say, I move to exactly range 3, for example, or exactly range 4. Seth, why would your opponent be declaring that? Why is that important?
Yeah, so exactly range. So each range is 6 inches. And a move, a speed 2 move, which is the generic default move, plus a miniature base is like 5.9 inches. So if you move into exactly range 3, that means your opponent can, like, let's say exactly range 3 and it's a range 2 unit. That means that unit cannot move up and shoot with their range 2 weapons. That's why you always want to clarify that you're communicating exactly range, and not just like completely rely on the measurement, because like
it's very close.
It's very close. Minis get bumped, tables get bumped. It happens. That's why you always want to declare your intentions of exactly range, because that's huge. Because if that doesn't work, if you don't declare it and like something gets bumped and they move and they measure it and they move and shoot, like there's nothing you can do. It's always declare your intention. But that's the big thing about like getting exact, is so that your opponent cannot move up and shoot you back at range. This helps a lot for like, I feel like a DLT Rebel DLT units, because they have that range 4 poke, that strong range 4 poke, to where they get into exactly range 4 and they poke, and then like a unit cannot come up and move within range 3, because if you have a range 3 gun line versus range 4 unit, you're protected against that. So that's really helpful. That's also really helpful whenever like a force user's coming in. So like getting within like exactly range 3, that means that the force user cannot like move, force push, and like, attack you.
Yeah, exactly. Similar range. If you need to get to exactly range 2 of a force user, they can't double move and use charge to lightsaber swing at you, right? So
yes,
it comes up in a lot of spots.
It forces them to use force push if they really want to engage with you, which the only unit who can like move force push is Maul. So like just be aware of Maul.
Everyone can move force push, but he can move force push and still get an attack. Right.
Correct. So that's what I meant.
And even again, when we talk about measuring all the time, maybe we'll do more of an episode in the future on certain measurements and ranges. But if hey, a speed 2 move is basically just under speed 1, then hey, if Maul needs to move force push, it's 4 inches for a speed 1 move on force push on a small base trooper. So I need to be not quite range 3 away, but I need to be 16 inches, and range 3 is 18 inches. So kind of knowing that stuff and saying, hey, I want to move in and take a really nice range 3 juicy shot on this Jedi, but I don't want to get too close, because sure, I'll get a shot off, but then they're in my lines and it might be game over. Yeah.
So always, again, declare intention and measure the exact range 3. And that's one of the big things that gunlines, that's why they're measuring a ton, is because effective gunlines really utilize that exact range for their benefit. And honestly, like force users or melee or close-up units, aggro units, they can't do anything about it. Like it's how it is,
It's a guaranteed thing. It's like, hey, no matter what happens, just physically, I know what you can and can't do. And that's very powerful.
That is it for the top tactical tactic. Next up, we have our keyword of the week, of the episode. And that is a special keyword. We actually recorded this earlier, talked about it earlier, but it did not make it into the episode. So we're bringing it back. And that is the mediocre keyword of contingencies. Matt, talk to us about contingencies.
I have many thoughts about contingencies. As you say, we recorded this rant earlier on what we thought would be a lighter episode, and then it ended up being a long one and got cut for time. Maybe because half of that was my contingencies rant. I had notes last time, and this time I have no notes, but I should be able to just wing it, because
you got this.
One of the things that I see a lot in list building is, hey, I want to take this character, and they both got maybe some competition in the 3-pip or the 2-pip. You know what I should do? I should add in Callus, and now I have contingencies, so I don't have to choose between card X and card Y. Here's the problem, though. You still only get to play a maximum of 6 command cards in the game, barring weird circumstances. So, sure, let's say you want to play IG-88 and Boba, a combo I love. But you say, hey, IG has 2 good 2-pips, and Boba has a really good 2-pip with making his way in the galaxy. The Flamers, whatever. You're probably leaving that at home. And you're like, I can't decide. You know what? I'll add in Callus. The thing is, sure, now you have all those cards available to you, but you still only get to play 2 of those 2-pips, and part of Callus's value is that he brings command cards, and in this specific example, his 2-pip is probably his best command card, so now you've just made the problem worse. And for most things in Legion, the marginal value of playing command card X versus command card Y, when they're both good command cards, it's not huge. It's not that big. Right? Like, obviously, hey, some situations card X is going to be better. Some situations card Y is going to be better. But is it worth paying for a whole unit that is kind of lackluster otherwise? Lando and Callus being the 2 options. Just for that marginal benefit? Like, you really, for that, want a card that, hey, if the right... It's very situational, right? Where, hey, if the right situation comes up, this card wins me the game. Or really swings things in my favor. And if it doesn't come up, then this card is pretty useless. And I want to have something else. Maybe... So the thing is, most cards in Legion are not like that. Good command cards are good because they're just good in almost every situation.
Yep.
You know, maybe the closest thing we ever got to it was something like I Am a Jedi. Way back in the day, because... it turns off Luke's attack, and he needs to be in, close to things that he wants to turn off the attack for. And it could be a bit situational back in the day. These days, I think less so because it's more of an aggressive meta. There's more. It's going to proc a lot more. Like almost every game I played with Luke back in the day, I was playing I'm a Jedi around this time last year. Like every game that I had Luke. So it's even less situational now. But a way that you can avoid having to play I Am a Jedi if the situation doesn't arise, you can just play Standing Orders turn 1, and it's free. It costs you nothing. You probably don't want to burn a command card anyways, right? You probably just need, hey, whatever, I'll put an order on Luke and I'll go last, and that's what I want. And then, hey, late in the game, I either play I Am a Jedi or I just play something else. And I just have more options. Right? So that's a reason why contingencies, again, isn't super valuable. And the machinations that it takes contingencies to work, rewind a bit. So another thing is that those sorts of command cards that have huge effects that you really want to like play a very specific effect for because it's going to have a high impact on the game, those are usually late game situations, right? In the early game, it's pretty rare that swapping this good command card for this good command card is pivotal and going to swing the match. Usually that happens in the late game. If you're in the late game and you have, let's go back to our Boba IG Callus example. Let's say you've got a machine made for killing. IG's 2-pip when he gets steady, great card, really good card when it's like, okay, I need to kill something. You put that one in contingencies. To be able to play that at the end of the game, you need to first play a 2-pip, which means depending on which 2-pips you had in your hand, you might have to play a Boba card or a Callus card, a legal card that you can swap out, which means whoever's card that is, that character has to be alive. Then Callus has to be alive to be able to use contingencies, and then IG-88 has to be alive to actually use his card. So there could be a situation where all three of your heroes, if you have to play a Boba card, swap it with Callus's contingencies to get IG-88's card, they all have to be alive in the late game. And if they're all alive in the late game already, things are probably going pretty well for you. Yeah. You know, so like it's not necessarily, you know, if you've got like Lando, Luke, yeah, probably they'll both be alive in the late game, but it's just it's not a guaranteed effect, and things could go wrong, and then you kind of lose that investment. So, you know, if you want to bring Lando or Callus because you think they're a great unit, awesome. Contingencies, icing on the cake. If your problem is I can't choose which command cards to take, that's not when you want to take contingencies. I did mention earlier you can only ever play 6 command cards. Kind of Lando gets around this, and this is why I like Lando more than Callus. He actually adds something with his contingencies, because Ace Up His Sleeve, his 2-pip, you can play it out of your contingencies to get an order and activate something. So you're actually gaining something that you wouldn't normally get versus having a little bit more command card flexibility. So that's an important thing. If it's like, oh, well, contingencies is great because I can play Ace Up His Sleeve from Lando's card. It's like, yeah, but that's like a good use of contingencies. Like if there's more contingencies in the future, I kind of want to see more effects like that, where it's like, hey, there's a super powerful or like a normal powered, you know, I don't want it to be overpowered ability if you play the card normally, but if you use it in contingencies, maybe there's some sort of secondary effect. Like, I think that's really cool, and it adds something. As is, if you're not doing that, the actual command card swapping is pretty meh, pretty mediocre. Yeah. If you are running contingencies, I would suggest usually put the character who has the contingencies, so Lando or Callus, put all of their cards, or whichever ones of theirs you're taking, put those in contingencies, because then if they die, you don't
or get
lose.
Flawed.
Pardon?
Or get flawed.
Or get flawed. Yep. Yeah. For Lando's case, you don't want to lose someone else's command cards in your contingencies, plus that character's command cards in your regular hand. Yes. Now, of course, even though that character could be alive, if your other characters die, you won't have cards to swap out. That kind of goes back to what we said before. But that's a good rule of thumb. That's my rant on contingencies. I think it's a very overrated keyword. I think it's fine. Like, if there was a 5-point upgrade in the game that was like a command slot that was like, you gain contingencies 1, it would be like, I would take it sometimes, because then I'm only paying 5 points for contingencies 1 if I have a command slot, which is actually a very good slot and very competitive these days. So like, I may or may not pay 5 points to get contingencies 1. Like, don't pay 100 points just to get contingencies 1.
I think we're not saying don't bring Callus, don't bring Lando. Like, they're decent,
fine,
they're like B tier, they're fine. But like, don't bring them because you want contingencies.
Because you can't decide on your command hand. Just make a decision. Figure out your command hand, or get 2 characters who gel better. Sorry, that's it. That's enough. That's my rant.
I'm so sorry to break. Thanks for your rant. Like, I'm so sorry if I'm going to break anyone's heart, but like, Star Wars Legion is not a hero hammer game. That's not play Shatterpoint.
I don't want to get off track, but I'm excited for Shatterpoint. I love playing heroes.
For sure. But heroes are great, but I would like, it's not hero hammer in a Star Wars Legion. Especially when they all have really good command cards competing with each other, it's just not going to be really effective. Find a list that gels well. Again, what Matt said, gels well together, synergizes well. 2 characters are enough, that's that's our key keyword of the day of the podcast. So there
we go. Spicy. I don't know if it qualifies as hot takes, But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
If you disagree
and if you
with
have,
me, write into bombadpodcast@gmail.com and
send
we'll
us all
ignore
your
it.
hate mail.
Yeah, we'll ignore it and tell you you're wrong. You're allowed to have wrong opinions.
Yes, and so, and if you do have a wrong opinion, we may or may not tell you have a wrong opinion on the podcast.
Yeah, we might make fun of you, but please.
Yeah, exactly.
Write in. We need content to talk about.
Yes, for sure. And so, well, thankfully, AMG is actually giving us a lot of content lately. So props to AMG for that. So appreciate
Looking
that.
forward to it.
Well, yeah, we are. So let's land this. Oh, go for it.
Yeah, speaking of content, some things to look out for. I believe next podcast, we're going to be talking with a certain someone involved with the 2023 AMG Worlds. So we'll have a little bit of a look ahead there as our special guest podcast. And then the podcast after that, we're actually closing in on the 5-year anniversary of Star Wars Legion. It came out March 18th, I want to say.
Something like that.
Mid to late March 2018. So our podcast coming out about that time, pre-Adepticon, will be kind of a look back at what's happened in 5 years of Legion. You know, what is my story with how I came into Legion? What's Seth's story with how he came into Legion? How have the metas changed? Like, how did we get from Worlds #1, where it's like, hey, it's all Wonder Twins and Boba/Palp, to Blizzard Force? You know, like how have the metas changed? What's happened in between? What are the landmarks for the game? That sort of stuff. I think I'm really excited for that episode. So keep an eye coming for that.
Thanks for listening to the Bombad Generals. I'm Seth.
And I'm Matt. And stay Gungan.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.